All right. Welcome to the first episode of Neel Sits Down. This is a podcast where I treat it like a public journal. I have a private journal, and some of those thoughts are interesting to me, and I want to share them, but I don't want to read out loud from my journal. It seems a little bit weird and intrusive. But I have some stories that I just feel like is better in this format. You know, I've been averse to podcasting for a while because I don't know. I just hate new things. I like the things that I like and I know and are comfortable to me, you know. That's a lot of us, I think. But you know what I realize is a lot of personal growth comes on the other side of that comfort. When you put yourself in situations where you make yourself uncomfortable, I think that's where you really start to grow as a person. And you could see this a lot, you know, for most of us, we have a regimented structure of change throughout our lives, right? We have school, and then we have most of us education, like college education. And then after that, that's when you start to realize when people are like 21 or 22, when those people, like some people are just, they stick to what they like and what they know, and that's comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then you'll notice a difference between people like that who just kind of stick to what they know and are comfortable with, you know, staying in their hometown, staying with the same people, not really trying new things, kind of just doing what they like. You know, it's life. Whatever. You should do the things you like, especially if it brings you joy. It's so hard to come by it these days, you know. But then you'll notice there's a lot of people who kind of put themselves in situations where they're uncomfortable. They move to a new city. They learn a new language. They go meet new friends, you know. They have friends, but they have this urge to kind of get out there. Personally, I grew up, I'm an only child, right? So being alone it's not a thing. Like, I don't really think about it. Most of my life has been that way. You know, both my parents had a job. So I spent a lot of time alone. When you grow up like that, I loved it because I feel so comfortable now in what a lot of people think are uncomfortable situations. You know, people thought it was crazy when I moved to New York City like 10 days after graduation. You know, I guess it was a crazy decision to kind of move across the country, but it was nice. You know, I had a lot of friends there. I had a lot of people that were there already, and that helped, you know. But I did make a lot of friends after that, and those people I'm still in touch with today, and that's also part of the process, right? Like if I wasn't alone and uncomfortable, I wouldn't have developed these skills to survive socially, right? I don't mean survive like there's no food on the table. I just mean like you can thrive in ways by putting yourself out there. And I kind of like that. I learned a lot from it. And I think that's what I want to do with this pod. I want to kind of put myself in this situation where I'm uncomfortable. I mean, it took me like forever to just start this. You know, I was waiting for so many different things. And I just kept putting barriers in front of myself, you know, instead of just doing the thing. And it feels good to actually do the thing, you know, regardless of how much I'm stuttering or whatever. You know, I get that it's not the best delivery, but it feels good to start. And I think that's an important thing to congratulate yourself on. I wanted to get a 4K camera. I wanted to get a Shure microphone. I wanted better set of headphones. I wanted 3 cameras. I wanted, so I can have guests, and then I can call it Neel Sits Down with, and then they say their name. You know, sometimes you just gotta get going, man. Because if you can just do that all fucking day. You could do that for a year. You could do that for 5 years and never really start, you know? But I think the important thing is to just embrace that discomfort of failure, you know? you're just afraid of failure for so long that you don't want to start. And then you don't start. And then it's been a couple of years, and then you start to think to yourself, maybe it's good that I didn't start because I'm kind of comfortable with the fact that I never failed. And that's a dangerous feeling to for me. I don't know. I want to be comfortable sometimes, but I feel uncomfortable when I'm comfortable too long. Does that make sense? Like I love watching movies and I love watching TV. I could sit here for hours, but if I do that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, on Monday, I'm going to feel pretty shitty, and I'm going to be looking forward to work, even though it's not whatever, my passion, but what it's doing is making me uncomfortable a little bit. Enough for me to break this cycle of monotony. And it's so paradoxical because so much of relaxation is just trying to get yourself okay with the fact that you deserve it. I don't know. I think I'm running in circles here. The point is, I wanted to start this podcast and it was very uncomfortable for me to do so. But now that I'm kind of making my way through this and hearing my voice and feeling awkward, I'm feeling comfortable being awkward, You can do with that what you will. But I wanted to start this because I like to put my thoughts out there in some medium. And for a while that was stand-up, right? I started stand-up in 2019. I did my first open mic in my college town in San Luis Obispo. And it was unbelievable. I mean, it was 5 minutes. And for the first time in my life, I was in the moment for like 5 whole minutes. It was unbelievable. It felt like I blacked out because that's how in the moment I was. I vaguely remember what I talked about, but I filled up the whole 5 minutes and it was awesome. I mean, it turned out so well. There was like at least 80 people in the crowd, which is kind of unheard of for an open mic, but it's a small college town and my friends were there. They were supporting me and it was great. And it was just so cool, man. I wish I taped it because, well, honestly, I'm kind of glad I didn't because I think if I look back on it now, I'd be pretty critical about it. And I like how I remember it now. I liked how it inspired me and it like rejuvenated me. And I like remembering how I was so into the moment that I wasn't thinking about anything else. I was just being there. And I've been chasing that feeling of just living in that moment because that just elevates the quality of your life so much more. If you're in the moment, like that day, I was in the moment for 5 minutes, right? I would take those 5 minutes over the rest of the 23 hours and 55 minutes of that day because that's how awesome those 5 minutes were. And it sparked something inside of me where I told myself, I have to do this again. I have to just, whatever that was, that feeling, I gotta chase that feeling. And it started this whole journey of stand-up, Immediately after I graduated, I moved to New York City. And there was no other reason. I took a pay cut. I had 3 or 4 different job offers at the time. And I took a $12,000 pay cut just so I could live in New York City and chase that dream, right? I don't know a lot of people that would make that decision, First of all, to just be on the other side of the country, not really having a social network like I did in California. And then second of all, to have this vague, like open-ended dream of like just doing stand-up, what is the goal here? I didn't know at the time. I still don't really know, if I'm going to be honest. I carved a little direction for myself once I got there. But I love that moment that I started, And it's kind of like how it was for this podcast right now. It wasn't perfect, but I started, right? And that's the important thing, is that you start something and then you make it better along the way. Because there's always improvements, right? I mean, if you start something and then that's like the best that you've ever done, isn't that bad in a way? Because it's like you didn't see anything to improve. I feel like there's always something that you can find to kind of make it better, right? And if you don't find that, then I don't think it's that you were a Picasso on day one or whatever. I think it just means you weren't able to grow and adapt, because life is just continuously going on, man. And if you have to evolve, it's you staying the same. It's like you're just a flat line and life is just going increasingly harder and more difficult and with these more problems and stuff. And if you're just staying the same, you're not improving on the things that you're doing. I just don't think that's the right. I think stagnation is also a scary thing, you know. I don't know. Where's that going with that, dude? Anyways, that New York journey was pretty interesting, to say the least, man. You know, just from that one open mic that I started in San Luis Obispo, I decided to move across the country and chase this thing. I didn't even know what the end goal was. I just knew that I wanted to be successful, you know? And that definition of success has changed so much throughout the years. It's that was 2019. What is it? Almost the end of 2025. So it's been almost 6 years now. And you know, that's something that I've realized is success is achievable for everyone, right? In this world, I think there are winners and losers. That's just the way I see it. There's winners and there's losers, right? But here's the thing. You get to define what winning is. Does that make sense? Like, some days for me, I'm a winner if I can get out of bed. You know, some days aren't good. And if I can just get out of bed, make myself a cup of coffee, and just not lay in bed, I consider myself a winner. You know, it doesn't matter what other people say. Doesn't matter if other people are like, my day started at 6 a.m. You soft, boy. I'm at 2 p.m. having my first cup of coffee. I feed my cat. I feel like a winner. I am a winner because that's how I defined it, you know? And when I feel like being a little bit more ambitious later, I will be. And I'll achieve those things too. But I think it's important to really define what it is for you that makes you feel successful, because there's so many people out there trying to tell you what your success is, right? A lot of people will tell you, hey man, you don't even have 10,000 followers, you don't have 100,000 followers, you're not successful. You don't have a late night appearance, you're not successful, right? You don't have a feature on this person's podcast, that is not successful. But aren't you doing this for you, you know? Aren't a lot of these things that why did you start this, right? Why did I start this? I felt good going up there. That day that I went up there on my first open mic, I felt like a winner. I didn't even set a goal for myself. But all it took was 5 minutes out of my day and to execute on something that I set forth. And I think that's the key, is that I wanted to do something and I did it. And I think that's when you look inside of yourself for the answer, that is where most of your happiness is going to be. There's too much external bullshit that people try to fling at you. And you don't even ask for it, you know? People are very, I don't know why people do this. They just unsolicited, like, almost feedback on your life. I've noticed this. Maybe you have too, but you're just doing your thing and you're enjoying it. And, you know, maybe people mean well. I don't know. A lot of the times it seems like a defense mechanism, because sometimes it's even like your own friends, you know, or people that you people that you're close to, I should say. And they'll just give you feedback. You'll just be doing your thing. And people are just in your ear like, should you really be doing that though? And I'm like, is it should or like I can and I did? Should you do anything? I don't fucking know. Yeah, pay your taxes and die. Those are like the two things you should do. But I just always get feedback, dude. Especially when you do stand up, bro. Like people are just, oh my God, dude. That's the thing I hate the most, I think, is just people don't get it, right? They're there for your set. They see your set. And a set is an ever-changing thing. To me, it's never just a one and done. Like, it's not like you achieve this set and then that's what your set is. It changes every time, right? Like in very small ways and also in large ways, right? So every time I do this thing, there's a structure, of course, and a lot of it is like the same, but there's things that change, right? So when someone catches you, it could be even on a good day when you did the best version of your set, but especially on like when you don't do well and people come up and it's almost like they were excited about that, like they were just like, yeah, you could probably do this though, and it would be funnier. Or like, I think what really makes me laugh is like people just think that I want to hear that I want to hear some sort of feedback about it. I know what the feedback is based on the laughter or whatever, dude. Like, I don't know. Everything was so cool the way that I got to New York City. It seemed like things were going really well. They were going my way. Everything just lined up in its place. At the time I was with my fiance, and we were together for a while, and we made the choice to move in together. We were already living together, but we moved there. And over time, man, things just fell apart. What else is there to say? I mean, I could do a whole 2-hour podcast about the divorce, but I think I'll save that for a different time. It's also just so weird and sad, and part of me just doesn't really want to really linger on that part of my life. There was a separation though, and it wasn't pretty. There's so many factors to it, but at the end of the day, I did move back from New York City. Wow, it is tough to talk about that. Here's the timeline, right? I moved to New York City in 2019, and I had just graduated college. I was with my then fiance, and after a while, 6 months, COVID hit, and it was this weird period of time where I was, 50% furloughed from work. We were both on unemployment. We weren't sure how to make rent a lot of the months. I was able to hold down my end, but my then fiance lost her job, and she was also walking dogs a lot of the time. And when people move back home, they don't really need that shit anymore. So there was no money coming in from her end, and so it was tough, to kind of cover a lot of the expenses that were coming out from the both of us. And I think that's when I started drinking a lot too, just because there was nothing to do, and that habit just developed because it was just, fuck it, I'm indoors, might as well just start drinking, and that's how things just, my dream of like doing stand up or whatever, like it just kind of started slipping away a little bit. And I wasn't sure. I was just kind of there in this new city that I barely had 6 months to get acquainted with. And all of a sudden everything shut down. Couldn't go out, couldn't hit up open mics, couldn't really do any of that for a while, and it was indefinite, and I didn't want to move back home because I was like, I just fucking got here, dude. I just spent so much money shipping all my things and like starting this life, and like, it just seemed like a quitter's mentality to go back at that point. And like, what am I going to move back? And then when things are all better, I'm going to move back again. No, man, if I move back home from New York, then that was it for me. I already knew that about myself. I'm not going to go through the circus of going back and forth a bunch just to, realize this dream. But I was getting kind of in my head about that because I was so scared to go to an open mic when I was there, and it took so long, and then finally things started opening up like a year later ish. And like, even then it was kind of hairy about how you got to do things. They put like condoms on microphone, not like, like a cloth over the microphone. And then you had to wear a mask, and, it was a whole thing when you started. So that's how my shit started in New York, but slowly, again, it was just, I just did it anyways. It wasn't perfect. Like, there's this consistent theme of every time I want to start something, it's got to be this ideal, perfect way. But it's just, how are you going to do that? How is it going to be perfect when you don't even know what causes the failure in the first place? So that's how it started. My first open mic was just kind of like that. And I remember in New York, it was so long. I didn't even realize this because I was doing mics in the Bay Area a little bit. And some of them went well. Obviously none of them went as well as the first time that I did it. Because there's that first time energy. There's that first time energy, and like, people are on your side when it's your first time. But after a while, people are like, all right, get funnier, So I was doing that in New York, and I realized it was kind of a humbling moment. I was like, dude, these people are hilarious, and this isn't even a comedy showcase. This is just an open mic where people are trying out new things. These people aren't like famous or whatever. They're just trying shit out. And that kind of got to me. I was just like, dude, I'm also not famous and trying things out, but these guys are way funnier than me. And what I didn't realize at the time was just that those people were just like me, except they had just been doing it more. And it really got into my head, and it kind of discouraged me from doing it because there were very few moments where I was in the moment doing my thing. I was still chasing that feeling from the first open mic, and it was tough, but I kept going with it. And over time, I met some people, created a small network within New York where I was, I knew people, and I would do their shows. And then eventually I started producing my own shows. And then I got friendly with some of the owners and, the bartenders at a couple of clubs. And I started producing shows at the clubs, and, everything just kind of started falling together. And it didn't happen, overnight. And I'm kind of realizing just how long these things take, right? Like, by the time I was producing a show, it was probably like 2 years in, maybe a year and a half at best. But things just kept going along. And eventually I kind of reached another plateau, or like a stagnation point, where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing this for. Am I doing this because I want to post reels? Am I doing this to gain more followers on Instagram? At this point, I had kind of understood the structure of a joke, how to build together a set. But what I was really struggling with was breaking out of that point where I was doing bringer shows, and the shows that I were doing weren't giving me the best feedback. So I wanted to do longer sets, and I wanted to do longer sets in front of newer and more diverse people, right? Not just my friends who come to my show and they've heard my thing, like my routine a bunch of times. But I wanted to do longer sets. That was like a big thing for me, because I realized what a lot of people were doing at the time, and they still are, is that they were doing so well about putting clips of themselves doing stand up online, right? But I didn't like doing that. I didn't like putting my stuff out there because, again, it just didn't feel polished. It didn't feel right. I like putting some of the stuff out there where I was like, all right, this is pretty much how the joke's going to go from now on. But then I realized when I do that, I put it out there on social media, I've kind of just burned this material, you know? Now when people come see me live, it's like, oh, I've heard this online, you know? And I didn't want to give up all my material. And I realized I only have so much. If I were to do this, I'm not going to have anything left. So then I kind of had to create this overarching goal, because when you have a larger goal to strive towards, the day-to-day becomes a little bit easier because there's something you're looking forward to, right? So it wasn't like a 10-year plan or anything. I just kind of got it in my head. I was just like, I want to put together a long form type of content where I'm not just focusing on the clips. I'm not just focusing on the followers or the algorithm. I'm doing something that I want to do. Again, I stopped listening to what other people were telling me. You know, when I was doing my thing, a lot of people would just come up and give me unsolicited advice like, hey, listen, you really got to nail that first 5 minutes down. When you have a perfect 5-minute set, then you can think about doing 6, 7, 8, 10, 15-minute sets. And I don't know how to put it, bro. I just felt like they were wrong. It just felt so anti-creative. Because who are you to tell anybody how to do something? You know what I mean? Like, isn't that the whole point of art is that you just do it? And whether it sucks or whatever, that's like, that's just your opinion, man. Like, a lot of it is going to suck objectively, but I just don't believe in stifling that, you know? If someone wants to do something that's like longer form, then they should do that. If someone wants to do something shorter, they should do that too. But I had a lot of people that were kind of telling me, don't do it, you know, focus on the first 5 minutes and then network your way. And after a few years, you'll be able to do your 5 minutes at a club. And then when those 5 minutes kill for like another 6 to 8 months, then you'll be a regular. And I'm like, I don't know. That just seems so corporate, you know? Like, you took this thing that I love doing in my free time and you made it like a timeline, like a project manager. You just like structured my life for the next year and a half. And you're like, you have these deadlines to meet. And now all of a sudden it's not fun anymore. I did this because it was fun, dude, and slightly uncomfortable, because I knew that there was something to be had from being uncomfortable and having fun being uncomfortable. Right? So I kind of realized again at that point, I got to start doing what I want to do, because who cares about these other people, bro? Like, the thing is, a lot of people who give you unsolicited advice, these are people who you don't even want to be like. Why would I want to be like you, dude? If I took all the advice that you gave me and I ended up like you, I would not like myself. And you're a great, whatever, you're awesome. But I want to be me, and I want to be a better version of me, right? And a lot of that has to do with, what is everyone doing? What can I do that's different and is authentically me, right? Now, a lot of people, for me, what this all culminated in was like, why do I like stand-up comedy? I like it because the ability to stitch together so many like sets together into like 1 hour was awesome. That's like what I loved, you know, like all the specials that I watched in middle school, high school, college, like all the greats for me, you know. Louis C.K. is my number one favorite stand-up comedian ever since middle school. You know, it's never changed. Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, you know, George Carlin, like all these greats, whatever I appreciated about them was just the ability to do this for like the duration of an hour. And an hour is so perfect for like this art form, you know? It's not too short, it's not too long. It's just right in there where you appreciate how long it took them to make this hour. And then I realized I can do that, you know? And it's, look, it may not be HBO worthy or whatever, but I could still do it, and I could do it on my own terms. You know, I don't have to wait for someone to pass me in an audition and put me up there. I don't have to wait. I can do everything I want on my own terms. And I think that's the realization where I was like, I do have the control. And what everyone else is trying to do is try and convince you that you don't have control over it, that other people have to give you the right, or they have to, you know, kind of let you in, that there are these invisible gatekeepers that are magically going to give you your spot, you know, when you're ready or whatever. But man, there is so much liberation in just being independent, being unapologetic about that, and doing everything you want on your terms, man. And that's what I did, you know. I started saving up some money. I started putting together a plan. You know, at the time I only had maybe 15 minutes, but afterwards I kind of put together this idea that, okay, in 6 months, I want to do this. I want to have a special. I want to put out my own hour. And I want to produce it. I want to direct the camera on how to do the intro shots. I want everything the way that I want it. I'm going to do this marketing. And I just want people who are happy to see me there. And I started this idea, I think maybe a year before I actually filmed it. And I didn't really do anything with the idea. I just kind of sat on it. And I'm like, I know that this is eventually what I want to do. And I know that, you know, whatever. Forget the clout, forget the followers, forget about, you know, whether other comedians agree with me or not. I just wanted to do this thing. But I didn't really act on it. And I think that's another important thing to realize is like, is when you have this idea, it's actually healthy to sit on things and only act on these things when you feel like acting on them. So much, like I really don't believe that art should be forced, right? If I don't, and this is one of the greatest things about life. If you have free time, if you have a great, you know, even an okay job, and you don't have to rely on your art to make you money and make your ends meet, one of the best feelings in the world is not doing something. Why? Because you don't have to. That's one of the greatest things ever, dude. I've started to say no so much, dog. Like, oh my God. Every time somebody wants to do something, you know, when I was younger, like 20 to 25, I was just down for everything, dude. But now, I'm not even like 30. But now when people ask me to do things, I'm just, I love saying no. I love it, dude. It feels so good because I truly don't want to do it. And I don't. Sometimes I will, but usually there's something sneaky that I get out of it that I'm not revealing to you. But, you know, like when coworkers ask you to hang out, you're like, all right, I mean, I'll do it. But only so that you guys don't think that I'm some antisocial person that hates all of you. And even then, it's whatever, you know. But I love not doing things, and I love not forcing my art. And that's why it just takes me so much longer to put things out there and to do things. And I think when you scroll on your phone and you're on social media or whatever, you see these people who are like putting shit out every day. And, you know, they got some different, they've built up this momentum where they're so creative and they're so funny and they're so like, they're so good at working. You know, they literally put in hours every day and they put stuff out. And then I realized I'm like, I don't have to do that at all. I could, if I didn't tape this pod for another 5 years, but then I did it eventually after 5 years, that would be great, because my goal wasn't to, there was no timeline on it, bro. Like the second that I start putting a timeline on things, I just feel this pressure and I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to, so much of my happiness lies with my freedom. I didn't even want to do it this morning. I had this idea that I wanted to sit here and do this. And then eventually you just get sick of it. Like you're just like, all right, and that sick feeling that you have towards procrastinating, it builds up into this thing where you're like, all right, today I will do it. And then you do it. But you did it because you wanted to do it. Does that make sense? I don't know. It makes sense to me, at least. A lot of people don't agree with me. They think I'm lazier, that I should be pushing myself. But again, man, you really can't rely on other people's agenda. It's just not going to vibe with you. You got your own pace, you got your own vibe about you, and that's what people want to see is you. And I've stopped telling people these things too. A lot of people would, when I was doing stand-up, people just hate that. They don't want to hear that you don't write every day and you're still able to make people laugh or whatever. It's just, you gotta, they're doing that. People will just not like you because you got a system that works for you at the end of the day. And it's all good. There's, like I said, no matter what you do, there's going to be people out there, and a lot of them aren't going to like you. And a lot of them who don't like you are going to pretend like they do. And you just got to pretend like you don't know that, and you just keep up this appearance. And that's what a lot of it is about. That's what a lot of life is about, not even outside of entertainment, But anyways, what was I saying? I was saying something. I taped, the hour was cool, man. I liked it. Oh, I had the idea a year before I actually did it, right? And I didn't really act on it because I didn't want to. But then I had a life-changing surgery, my spine. For most of my life, ever since I was 16, I've had kind of this terrible back pain in my lower back, and it kind of restricted everything that I did. I couldn't really play sports. I couldn't even sit down for long periods of time. There's a whole lot of things that I wasn't able to do because of this back pain. I had surgery when I was 16. I used to play tennis I used to play competitive tennis. In high school, I played number one singles on the varsity team. And at 16, I remember I felt something shift in my lower back during one of the games. And I remember I was up one set, and I was up like 5-3 in the second set. I was so close to just winning that for my team, right? And then something happened in my back, and then I knew something was off. I couldn't move as well. And then I lost the next like 7 games. And in the third set, I just completely lost it all, And I remember feeling weird after that. There was this like period of denial, like, oh, it must just be like a tear or something like that. And then I went and finally got an MRI like a couple months later when this problem wasn't letting up, and I was just in pain. I couldn't sleep or lay down. Turns out I had a slipped disc. And I didn't really understand what that meant, at the time. I didn't understand that I would never reach that level of athleticism in tennis ever again. It took me years to realize that I was never really going to play at that level again, And I got a microdiscectomy for that because PT didn't help. I wasn't able to sleep. So at 16, I got a microdiscectomy. And that's when they shave off part of the disc and then they push it back so that it's not pinching the nerve. And that was what's causing the pain, is that the disc was hitting my sciatica nerve and it was sending pain down the left side of my body. And it felt good, but I was finally somewhat pain-free. I remember I woke up from that surgery, and even though I was still on painkillers, I remember thinking, I still feel something. I can lay down and I feel okay now, but I remember feeling I still feel something. And my doctor talked to me afterwards, the surgeon, and he told me, this really, we're glad that you're able to like lay down and sit for a long period of time now. We're glad you're not, taking Vicodin every day to deal with this. But I got to tell you, in 10 years' time, you're probably going to need a spinal fusion. And he said that then. He said that in 2016 and in 2023. He said this when I was 16 in 2013. And in 2023, 10 years later, on the dot, is when my disc slipped again. And he even said it back then. He said, basically, because your disc is smaller now, it's no longer pinching the nerve, but it's a smaller disc than the rest of it because we had to shave off part of it. And because of that, it's not absorbing as much load as the other discs. So because of this, you're going to develop degenerative disc disorder. And that's basically the disc that was operated on is degenerating, right? Because there's too much load and it can't handle that. And because of that, the other discs above it have to take on more load. And because of that, those are also going to start to degenerate. And in 2023, or I guess the end of 22, I remember I was working late on a Friday. I was working from home at the time, and I was taking a break. It was around 9:50 p.m., and I wanted to sit down on my couch. So I got up from my desk, and I walked over to the couch, and I sat down. And I was smoking pretty heavily back then. So I was reaching for my grinder and my papers. And then when I reached forward for my papers, I reached forward like this. And then all of a sudden, I felt that same shift in my back that I felt when I was playing tennis. I felt it when I reached forward. And then I just felt like this seizing up of my lower back. It just felt like a brick, It felt like my entire back was a cinder block. And then I felt one of the worst pains of my life. It was so bad that I was on the couch. I just remember I couldn't do anything, and I just felt myself tipping over. And I just tipped over until I was on the ground. And then I just started screaming. I started screaming in this empty apartment. And we had great sound insulation, so nobody heard me, dude. It was bad. And it was so bad, I couldn't get up. I was just laying there, and my fiance at the time was it was Friday night. She was hanging out with her friends at one of her friends' apartment, but my phone was on my standing desk, and it was elevated at I was standing at the time before I took the break to sit down on the couch, and so I was on the ground and I couldn't get up. I was just kind of like seizing there, and I didn't understand what was going on. I couldn't get up. Every time I tried to, sit up or like turn on my side or push myself up, I couldn't. It just sent shockwaves down my entire body, my legs. And I was just in so much pain. I laid there for about 50 minutes before I finally, eventually was able to kind of push myself up strong enough to where I was slightly hunched over. And then I desperately grabbed at my desk and miraculously grabbed my phone. But that action of me like just lurching up and grabbing my phone was so painful that I just immediately knocked back down And my upper back, I remember my shoulder hit the coffee table on my way down again. And but this time, I had my phone with me, and I knew I had pain meds and muscle relaxers in the bathroom, but it took so much energy, and I was profusely sweating, and I was in so much pain. There was no way I'm gonna make it to the bathroom, so I called my fiance at the time, and I called her, and I said, I need you to come home immediately. Something happened. Something's not right. I'm in so much pain right now. I need you to come home and give me my pain meds and my muscle relaxers. And she came home about 15 minutes later, and she helped me. And there wasn't much to do. I was just in pain. And even after I took all the medicine, I couldn't do anything. So the next day I woke up, I could barely even get up. And luckily it was a Saturday, right? And it was just such a huge debacle. I mean, I don't even know what I did for work on Monday after that, but it got better, but I couldn't stand up straight. I was hunched over about 90 degrees, and I needed like a cane. I needed crutches or something. And I just knew in the back of my head I needed surgery again, This wasn't something that just gets fixed. And this time it was worse. I couldn't sit down for more than 10 minutes. I couldn't stand for more than 2 minutes. Even laying down was tough, right? And after a while, I got convinced to go see a surgeon, So I saw one in New York City, and got consulted with one there, got an MRI. And he showed me the MRI. He's like, look, I'm not going to lie to you. That disc that you got operated on, it slipped again. And he said it slipped to the right. And then he pointed to the disc above it. He's like, you see the disc above that? That one slipped to the left. Now they're both pinching nerves. And he's like, we got to do something about this, but it's going to be a 2-stage surgery. So what he had to do this time was, he said he was going to replace my L4, L5, and then fuse my L5, S1. The L5, S1 was the one that I got the microdiscectomy on. And I was so mind blown. I was like, wait, we have prosthetic discs? And he's like, yeah, it's a pretty standard common thing now. And I remember my surgeon from 2013 telling me, at the time he was like, if you go to Germany, they have these things called prosthetic discs that you can replace the disc, but it's not approved in America. And at least it's not common practice now. But in the span of 10 years, it just became this commonplace thing. My surgeon in New York was just like, yeah, I do these like at least once a week. And I just realized in that 10-year period, there was a solution, There was something that I could do for my problems. And that was kind of an interesting realization. I was like, I could be rid of this, this pain. And after a lot of paperwork, talking to my work, I had to get 12 weeks off from work. And that is when you get on disability. Not only that, I got disability paperwork approved for my fiance because she was my official caretaker. And that's what we did. That's actually what this my friend made this for me. This is a model of my spine. He makes these. They're called demo spine, and they're models of spines. And this one, I asked him to make a custom one for me here. You could see that in the back or on the side here is probably better. There's a fusion at the bottom. So basically, the vertebrae are fused together here. And they can't really move. So they're not very flexible. But what you can see is that they move above. And that little red thing here, the red thing over here is the prosthetic disc. So I kind of like this model, man. And it was very nice of my friend, Izette, to make this for me. I like it because it's such a powerful moment for me where I was finally able to, stand up. I was able to do the things that I wanted to do. I was able to get inspiration for my comedy special. That's actually why I called it Neel Stands Up, because it's a stand-up set. But after I got out of that second surgery in 2013, I was completely pain-free. I couldn't believe it. After, 10 years of constant pain, it'll do a number to you, man. It'll change your outlook on life. It'll kind of fuck you up in terms of like limiting your beliefs, For the longest time, I thought I couldn't do so many of the things that I wanted to do. And I remember waking up from the surgery, and unlike the first one, I remember thinking, whoa, I don't feel anything, in a good way, right? I was still on a lot of pain meds, but after those wore off, and after like the first 6 weeks post-op, I remember thinking, holy shit, I actually feel great, and it was unbelievable to just wake up every day. For a good 6 months after that surgery, I remember waking up every day and legitimately being like, this is amazing. This day is going to be great because I don't have any back pain. And that's where the inspiration came from, to start my first comedy special. And I didn't rush it, is the point. You know what I mean? Like, I went through a lot of things to get to that point. And when I got there, I wasn't like, oh my God, I wish I came to this conclusion earlier, like 6 months ago. Why did I take so long? No, I was like, that worked out, and that's the power of being independent and the power of just being on your own terms. I realized after that I had a direction to go in. I had a theme. I didn't want to just put together like all these random ideas and jokes. I wanted there to be like an overarching theme for this. So when I started to feel better, I actually got off of my antidepressants. I was on Zoloft and bupropion for a while. I started taking that I started taking it when I got with my ex-fiance in college. I don't know if the timing of that was prophetic, but that's when it started. I was doing it for, I want to say, at least 5 years, maybe even 6. But then I realized so much of my depression was rooted in this physical pain that I had. And I felt so much stronger physically and also mentally, in that 12-week recovery period where I had time off from work, but I was still getting, a portion of my paycheck to like help pay rent and like live my life and recover, going to PT. I just started to feel more like myself, and I started tapering off of the antidepressants naturally, I did it slowly. I didn't really consult anyone. I just kind of knew that this was going to be better for me. And I tapered off over the span of 3 months. So I kept lowering my dose a little bit. And then finally, I was just completely off of them. And I felt great, I felt stronger. I felt more able. And, people ask me, like, do you regret getting on antidepressants? The answer is no, because I viewed them as a necessary thing to undergo in order to reach the other side, right? When I had spine surgery and I had to go to PT and learn all these things, I exercised, right? I did core exercises. I did lat pull downs. I did all those things. And I did very specific training exercises in those 12 weeks to help get my back stabilized and moving again. That's kind of how I view like therapy, or that's kind of how I view talk therapy, and that's kind of how I view the pills too. Like they're not meant to be forever, right? they're meant to be these tools that you use, and then eventually you create a system that works for you, right? For me, it took 5-6 years of being on those pills. But again, I saw inside myself, and I knew that I can stand up on my own. I can do this thing on my own. I don't need these pills. I hate this feeling of being dependent on this random substance. And I tried it. I didn't know whether it was going to work, whether I decided to see, can I stand up on my own? Because it's a good thing to check for yourself. Do you need this? Can you maybe, are you at a better place in life now? And I felt like I was after that surgery. I felt stronger. And then as I tapered off of it, I felt mentally better. I felt like I was rediscovering like this athleticism that I had lost since tennis. I haven't played tennis. I started lifting weights. And when I moved to New York, I couldn't really afford a gym membership. So I was just kind of working out, like doing random shit when I could. Honestly, I wasn't working out as much. And so I was rediscovering this like control over my own body and the things that I ingest. And I was getting back into exercise. And I realized that the combination of these two things was healthier for me than the drinking and smoking. So as I came out of this surgery, I was learning to stand up on my own 2 feet. I was learning to get back into exercise. I was learning how to let go of like the drinking and the smoking. Because again, the pills, drinking, and smoking, all these things, they were just like these coping mechanisms that I had for all this pain that I had in my back. And I just didn't realize it at the time. That's how I was medicating and getting myself to feel better. Yeah, I was doing stand up and like whatever, seeing friends made me feel better. But the things that I felt that were out of my control, which was ingesting all these random things that I thought were making me feel better, I found natural ways to release those same endorphins. And that felt better for me. I don't know what it's like for other people. A lot of people, they do have to be on the pills. Otherwise, they don't reach that point of stability. I don't think, for me at least, I don't want to speak on other people, but for me, I always knew that the best form of existence was to be independent of other people's thoughts and opinions, but also independent of substances. And I had to go through that whole surgery. I had to go through the pills. I had to go through talk therapy. And then I reached this point, and it just lined up so well with the post-surgery. Like the timing of it was just amazing, And it made me appreciate life a lot more, because those pills, they were helping, but also they were kind of dampening the things that I felt, right? Because when you take them, like, you'll feel less depressed, right? But you'll also feel less happy, less angry, less of everything. You just feel less. Now, when I was off of them, I was feeling so much more. And I was like, it just felt like I was wearing like a weighted vest. And then I was finally relieved of it, and I just felt lighter, and everything just was coming a little bit more naturally to me. And it felt good. It felt good enough for me to start this theme, this ongoing theme of like standing up, And I tied it in, and that's where the idea came from, basically. And after that, I basically, I got the surgery in, I think, end of October of 22. And then in 23, January is when I started going back to work. But then that's when I realized, I was like, I'm already producing a show at, this venue, Comic Strip Live. And I was like, I have the people. I know the people there. I generally can draw a crowd. And if I can produce a show there with other people, why not? Why can't I just do that for an hour of myself, you know? And that's when the idea really started to take off, where I was like, oh my God, like I can do this if I really wanted to. And I think part of me also knew that my time in New York was coming to an end. You know, I always knew that New York was going to be a temporary thing. I knew that I was going to return to California eventually because most of my friends are in California. My family's in California. And as much as I love the lifestyle in New York, I think there's a certain level of stability that comes with living in California. You know, I don't like not having a washer dryer in my unit. I don't like paying so much more in rent. If I was rich and I could afford $1,000 a month for a car garage and I can afford $5,000 for rent, hey man, yeah man, I would live in New York. No, you know what? Even then, there's the weather. The weather is just, oh my God, I'm like wet 90% of the time. You know, there's like maybe 12 days out of the entire year in New York where I am not sweating. I couldn't believe how much. There were days where I would just take a shower and then I would get out of the shower and I would just sit in front of the AC for like a cool 30 minutes. And then I'd be like, all right, I'm finally dry, not perspirating. Let's go out. I would walk downstairs, open the door of my building, and then immediately just start sweating. I'm like, what is the point? How do you enjoy this? And then I go and I'd see people in like full suits. I'm like, I don't get it. How do you guys do this? Is this not uncomfortable? I remember having this thought of like, we should just put everything in New York City indoors. Just put a large bubble around it and just pump cool air through it. And then this will be the best place on earth. And then I realized I could just not live there in discomfort. Anyways, my time was coming to an end in New York. But it was also for financial reasons. You know, I wasn't really saving any money there. And it felt like after this special, it felt like a good closing chapter for my life, you know? And I think we had worked out the details, my at the time, my wife and I, we worked out the details and we realized by the end of the year, we're probably going to return back to the Bay Area. And it just felt right. You know, there's just thematically, like from start to finish, like I'd already had such an overarching theme for my special. And it just felt like, yes, this is a great place to close the books. You know, I'll film it in July and then I'll have six-ish months to kind of just say my goodbyes and really just enjoy the last of New York City. And then I'll make it home, you know? And the first 6 months of 2023 were awesome. You know, I was still riding that high from post-surgery, just being pain-free, medication-free. I was exercising every day. I was stretching. I was doing better at work because I didn't have to worry about my pain. I wasn't like high all the time anymore. I wasn't drinking as much. And, you know, I'll say this. It took me so long for me to come up with my first 5 minutes, right? Like a 5-minute set that I was doing. It took me maybe a year to come up with a solid 5 minutes. And then it took me 6 months to come up with 10 more minutes because I kind of understood how to do it. And so I had 15 minutes before I went into surgery, right? That's 15 minutes out of an hour. So I was really, really stressed out. Like, how am I going to do this? Because what I did basically was I announced it. I'm like, I'm doing a special. I'm taping this in July. It's going to be one show only. And I posted it and it was out there. Now, I couldn't be a bitch then. I had to come up with like an hour, you know? And I think I did that on purpose because I knew that if I didn't just act on it, I knew that I would not do the thing that I wanted to do, or I would like wait on it way too long. You know, I talked about deadlines earlier, but this one I set for myself, you know, on my own terms. And it had this overarching theme. And again, because I had this theme of like, I'm coming out of this, I'm standing up finally for myself. And then at the end of the year, I'm going home to California. It felt right. It felt like the right amount of push for myself. And that's what I did. I set that and I posted it out there. Everyone's like, oh, that's awesome. You know, like people are like, how can I get tickets? And I was like, dude, I only have 15 minutes. How am I going to do this? You know? And on top of that, I got to do the marketing, and then I got to like sell the actual tickets. Like, imagine how embarrassing it would be if like I announced this thing where I'm doing an hour and then I paid for all this shit and the equipment and like the cameras and all this stuff, and then like 20 people showed up. Man, that venue seats 175. I was stressing, to say the least, right? But it just, you know, that amount of push that I had less than 6 months to come up with 30 more minutes of material at least. Somehow I did it. You know, I just reached out harder. I asked people for spots on their shows. I said, hey, I'm doing this, and I would love some time to run some new material. And so I only did new material for a good, 3-4 months. And then when I had like maybe 6 weeks left, I kind of realized like I'm not going to be able to run my material at all. Like I'm not going to be able to do the full 45, 50 minutes that I have in my head at once. So I realized an aspect of this risk of, this independence of like taping my own special. One aspect of it was that I just had to wing it in some degree. So all I had experience was I broke it up into little chunks. I had like 10-minute chunks and 15-minute chunks. And what I did was I ran these different chunks at different shows. And the best thing that I could do was just have an idea like, okay, I guess I'll put this part here, and then it'll tie together like this. And then I wrote it all out on a piece of paper, but I never ran it. I never ran the whole thing. And there was a lot of it that, when I actually did tape it, I didn't write it down. Like, it just came to me, That was one of the coolest things, is that everything worked out. And it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like I was severely underprepared. It just looked like things somehow worked. And I filled up the entire 50 minutes, And it's when I realized, like, what was I worrying about, It worked out so well. I had people fly in from California to come see me. I had people from New York that, I sold about 110 tickets. The audience looked full. It was great, man. Like I had marketing out there. My friend Javi made these like little promotional stickers, and I slapped them on little envelopes so that when people came in, they could put their phone in the envelopes, and like, it's like a real show where you're not allowed to have your phone out and record or anything. But everything worked out, man. And it all started because I just had an idea. And I didn't wait for the idea to be perfect. I just had the idea, and I knew that at some point I'm going to do something with this. And the idea of perfection on the first try is it's going to hold you back. I don't think you're meant to be perfect. Even if you do achieve what you think is perfection later on, you are supposed to do better than that. You're not supposed to reach perfection and then just sit there. Because perfection to me is a direction that you strive towards. It's not a destination that you arrive at. And I think that mentality has helped me to get to where I am now. I've after that special, I'll say this, that special was probably the peak. I filmed it a day before I turned 28. 27? I think I was 26 when I did it. Hold on. 23? This is 25. I don't know. I think I did it before I turned 27. So that was kind of an awesome thing that I did, was just I did that. And then at midnight, when I was drinking at the bar after celebrating with my friends, I turned 27, I think. That was the peak of 2023, because everything after that was just this amazing fall off, nosedive. And it was just one of the worst periods of time of my life. Dude, it was kind of amazing that I had just reached this peak of my life. And then so very quickly, like the next day, it just turned to shit, you know? And I don't want to get into the details. Maybe not this episode, but, you know, obviously there was the divorce. But there was just so much more going on besides the divorce, you know? Because we were together. Like, in that special, I talked about us being together. It was kind of funny. I didn't realize this because some of the stuff was just coming off the top of my dome, right? Not everything I had performed in that hour was like stuff that I'd written down. And my friend reminded me this like a year later. He's like, dude, you know, you talked about like what would happen if you and your wife got divorced in your special. And I didn't remember this because my friend Brandon had taped everything for me, and he had a lot of the footage on his end. And he was reviewing the footage later and was just like, dude, that's kind of crazy that you talked about that. And I didn't even remember it because I was kind of in the moment for that special. Hey, I guess I was in the moment for longer than 5 minutes there. So yeah. But, you know, the fall off in 2023 was insane, dude. First of all, not only did I get divorced, but right after taping this special, which was themed about me finally standing up and being injury and pain free and like not being depressed anymore, I got ACL surgery. I tore my ACL. It was already torn, but I didn't realize how bad it was. And so I had to get surgery for that towards the end of the year, right? And so that was a whole thing. You know, like it just kind of deflated everything. I was like, bro, I just fucking told everyone that I'm good. But now I gotta fucking get another surgery and be in recovery for how many weeks? Take time off from work again? And so I got the ACL surgery, which is good. I had to do it, you know? But 4 days after I got the surgery, my wife left me. So I was just alone in my little apartment. She packed up her things. By the way, not even all her things. She just packed up like a little to-go bag and like some few essentials, left a majority of her stuff in there, took her cat. We had 2 cats. She took her cat and then just went to, I think, her sister's or her friend's place. I don't know. She was staying somewhere and she was just gone. And this was a period of my time where I was on crutches. I had this huge brace. It wasn't the flexible brace. It was like a huge brace on my leg. And I couldn't really walk around, you know? I couldn't shower. I couldn't do anything. It was really tough for me to get my pills. So when she left, I kind of was like, how am I supposed to do this, right? So I had to call my friends to kind of help me get through a lot of that. I had to ask my friends to help me shower, which was wildly emasculating. Because I get it, they're your friends. If my friend asked me to help them shower because they got out of a surgery less than a week ago and their wife left them, I would, of course, I would do it, right? But in the back of my head, I'd be like, bro, fuck. God damn it, dude. Like, this is weird, you know? So they didn't see my dick or anything. But it was still weird, you know? Like, I don't know. I had to cleanse myself, and like, you know, you don't want to be reliant on someone, even if they're like your best friend, to get you through something like that. You know, of course they understood. But again, it is weird. And so a lot of that, you know, and I couldn't even pack my own things. You know, I had to ask my friends. I asked different friends at different times to help me pack like a lot of things. And well, there's a whole lot of detail in this moving out process that I don't want to get into just yet. But basically, I didn't have as much money in my joint savings account. It was transferred. And I didn't have help to move out all my things. And I had to close out the apartment with my landlord by myself. And I had to move all my shit out and ship it out. My mom came for a few days to help me through the surgery and to help me pack the last remaining things and to ship it all off. But at this point, I was still very much on crutches, and I had to move home. I had to fly home, right? I had a whole cat. I still had to do all that. I had to like feed him and change the litter, and like all those things are just so difficult when you can't really bend one of your knees, you know? I also had to go through PT again. Same guy. Was kind of surprised, like, what are you doing back here, you know? But I had to do all that. And towards the end, it just felt weird. It just felt like I was like, oh man, it was going to be so cool the way that I was going to leave New York. Like I taped the special, I say goodbye, I get to do all these things, I'm healthy, and I get to go back home and like finally save up for a house or whatever for me and my wife. And then instead it's just like, no, you're going to be a loser. You're going to be disabled. No one cares about the special. It's been 6 months. What are you up to now? Apparently being a dork. My own friends were getting on with their own lives. You know, they're getting a little bit older. And so they were spending time with their significant others. I just felt lonely. I felt very lonely. And I remember going out in my last week. At this point, I had transitioned to a more flexible brace, but I was still on crutches. I remember going out. I was going to my favorite restaurants because I wanted to go eat at all my favorite places one more time before I fly back out to California. And I just remember, like, man, it used to be so fun to go to these places. But doing it alone and severely disabled, it just was such a vibe kill, you know? And that's how I left New York. I left New York on crutches, in a lot of pain, with my cat, and like a suitcase and a backpack. And I went home like that, you know? I had to, on the flight home, called a cab, obviously, and spend way too much money getting to the airport. And then had the airport people get a wheelchair for me and then wheel me through security. And this is the even shittier part, dude. I got to the airport, get through security, get boarded. I sit down. There's an hour delay. And then the pilot announces that they have to delay the flight until tomorrow morning. And I'm wildly unprepared for this. So we get deboarded, and they did arrange for like a hotel and a cab service. But I wasn't anticipating this. Like for my cat, And I feel so bad. My cat's name is Dog, Dawg, and Dog was so stressed out already because he's a cat, and you're not supposed to. Like, he doesn't like being outside of his natural habitat or whatever. It's a new place. It's very loud, and we get to the hotel, and I'm like, holy shit! I don't have any cat litter. Like, I just assumed that he could hold in his pee and his shit because it was like a 5.5 hour flight. I was like, yeah, I'll be home soon, Like, he can hold it. He's done it before. I never really prepared for that. That's my bad. But he wouldn't go. I let him go in the hotel room, and I was like I laid out like a little pee pad because I did pack one of those, but he didn't sense his litter, right? So he doesn't realize that he can go when he needs to. So, dude, this poor guy, he held it in the whole time. And I'm like, oh, we're so fucked, Like, I get to the airport a little bit early the next morning, at like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. or something like that. I think the flight was at 8. And I'm sitting there getting breakfast at the airport bar. And then out of nowhere, the bag is in front of me and I'm eating my eggs or whatever. And out of nowhere, he starts meowing so loudly, and it just smelled like shit. And I'm like, oh my God, he just took a fat fucking shit on this table in the airport. We just passed through security, And I was feeling so happy for him because I'm like, oh, he's going to do it. He's going to hold it in. That's when he went. And I had to go to the bar and I was like, do you have napkins? And they're like, yeah, what do you need them for? And I didn't. And I was like, my cat had an accident. And they gave me those little bitch ass ones, like those little 3-inch by 3-inch ones that you're supposed to keep your drink on. They gave me those. They're super thin. I had to clean up all the mess like that. And I was still on crutches, by the way. It's fucking impossible just for me to get like to the bar and back. And I had to do that multiple times with like holding things of shit and just throwing it in the trash can. And I was like, just thankful that there weren't that many people at the airport bar. Oh my God. And then finally I take him to like the family bathroom where you're supposed to like change your kids' diapers or whatever. And then I kind of get situated and I clean the carrier as much as I could, and I clean him a little bit, but it smelled like shit, dude. It smelled so bad. I boarded the flight like that, and oh my God, these girls behind me, they were just complaining about the smell the entire time. It was a 5.5 hour flight, and I remember they like eventually, like in the beginning, they're like, oh my God, what's that smell? I know, it's so bad. Did someone fart? And I'm just sitting there like, holy shit, dude. I'm so mad at them, but also they're so in the right. Like, it smelled so bad, dog. And I didn't know what to do. I just kind of sat there quietly, like hoping that they wouldn't just like peer over the ledge, and they were like, it's this guy. He's the shitty one. And like, thank God they didn't do that. I think that would just destroy me. I think that would be the tipping point for me. I would just open the emergency door and just walk out if that happened to me. But I remember he took a nap, and then I took a nap as well. I woke up, and then like 30 minutes later, I think they woke up, and one of them was just like, oh my God, it still smells. I was getting angry and frustrated. I'm like, already I'm fucked up mentally, like this whole divorce thing. And I was just like, there's just two girls behind me, so annoyed. My flight got delayed. It smells like shit. It's like, I know it smells like shit, bitch. Like, anyways, I made it home in one piece. Dog was, I just felt so bad for him, man. I didn't have a spare carrier. I cleaned it, but he was still sitting in his own piss and shit. I never felt so much like a terrible owner until that moment, man. And now I'm never going to forget the litter. No matter where I go, even if I'm in my car, I have a little bit of litter because I know what that's like now. Anyways, my mom picked me up from the airport, and we drove. And what's interesting, as at that time when I was moving back from New York to the Bay Area to live with my parents for a little bit, my parents had sold their house in the East Bay area, and they moved about 45, 50 minutes away to a new area. And I remember thinking at the time it was interesting timing, because we were both going through this phase where we were transitioning to a different part of our lives. We had lived in that house for, I think, a good 10 to 15 years. I forget how long it's been. And it was our first house that my parents owned. So they ended up selling that and buying another one. And it just lined up well, and it's not well, but like I remember thinking like, I don't really want to be in my hometown right now, because my ex-wife and we went to high school and college together. And I remember thinking, oh, this is, I'm glad I have a little bit of distance from people that I might run into. Even her, she moved back home too, so I didn't want to run into her, obviously. But I didn't want to run into anybody else either, because when shit like that happens and you're in a suburb, dude, people fucking talk, dude. Oh my God. And let me say this, bro. People don't care about the truth. All right. They want a good, juicy story that they can tell their friends over like cocktails at this shitty bar that they go to because it's the only nice one in the area that doesn't fuck up your fucking beer tap or whatever it is, dude. I don't know. But they don't care about hearing both sides. They just want a terrible story about the downfall of like these two people that they've known, and they want to share it. And I get it, but I didn't really want to be around that. And it was nice that my parents were getting a different home. But at the time, they were living in Walnut Creek. They got a 1-bedroom apartment. So there was only, when I flew in, they were going to get the keys to the new house in 3 days. So we had to stay at that apartment in the 1-bedroom for three days before we could move into the new house, because the new house wasn't ready yet. And so we arrived there, my cat, me, I'm on crutches. The first thing I did, obviously, took him out, threw out the carrier, had my dad buy a new one, and then I gave him a shower, and I cleaned him up and, set up his whole situation, his food, water, his litter. Finally got that out of the way. Then I showered, and then I realized I'm just out here now. I don't even have my belongings. I have my suitcase, and I have, my backpack with my laptop, and I couldn't just take time off. I had to continue work. I flew in on a Saturday. I had to start work on Monday in that apartment, and it was 3 people. It was us 3, my parents and me, in that small 1-bedroom. So I slept on the couch, and, on that 3rd day, we made it through. They packed up all their things from that apartment that they had for a month, and we drove to the new home. And the new home was cool. It was different. It was very remote, much more farmland area, a little bit different. Like our house was brand new construction. All the other houses were still being constructed next to us. And we moved in, and the next day, my cat escaped, and he went missing. On the very second day, I didn't see him for a while. He was just gone, and it just felt like right when I had just figured out. It just felt like right when I had moved back home and I had taken a breath of relief that we had finally moved to this new home, and I could start healing mentally and physically. It just felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And it hurt so bad. Again. You know, it felt like everything was going against me. You know, it's like I had just gotten back surgery and taped a special and had like this amazing moment. And then I got divorced. And then I got ACL surgery. And then I had finally started recovering from that doing PT. And then I fly back home and the whole plane thing. And then, you know, it's like, all right, well, at least we're going to be in this new home. And then after that, my cat runs away, man. My cat was like my pillar to my sanity. It just sucked so badly that he was just gone now. I didn't really know what to do after that. I didn't know. I still had to work. You know, I was working, first of all, first week without Wi-Fi, so I went to a different coffee shop. And I guess at some point, the door was open or whatever when they were moving stuff in, and he got out. And when I came back from the coffee shop, my parents told me that they haven't seen him in a while. So he was just gone, you know, for the majority of that. Man, I talked about a lot. I think I'm going to call it right now. I think the next episode I'm going to do the redemption arc.